All right, so today we're jumping right into one of the biggest showdowns in modern political philosophy. We're going to be looking at Michael Sandel's famous critique of liberalism. And, it's a debate that really forces us to ask a super fundamental question. Who are we really? And how in the world do we build a just society based on that answer?
Okay, so let's just get right to the heart of it. Let me ask you this. Who are you? Are you a product of the choices you make, the values you freely pick for yourself, or are you more a product of your circumstances? The family, the community, the history you were just born into, all the stuff you didn't choose, but that absolutely makes you who you are. Seriously, think about it for a second. Your gut answer to that question puts you smack in the middle of this entire debate.
All right, so first up, let's unpack this big idea. Liberalism, as a political philosophy, is really built on this one specific vision of who we are as people. And it's this very vision that Michael Sandel takes aim at. He has a great name for it, the unencumbered self.
So what on earth does unencumbered self even mean? Well, think of it this way. The idea is that at your absolute core, you're this free, independent agent. Your true identity, the real you, exists before and is totally separate from any of your goals, your beliefs, your loyalties. You are, above all else, a chooser.
And this is a really powerful way to think about it. For the unencumbered self, it's not that I am my attributes, it's that I have them. See the difference? So, in this view, you aren't your job or your religion or even your family role. Nope, you just have those things. They're like possessions of the self, but they don't make up the self. So if you decide to change your mind or switch your loyalties, the real you, that chooser deep down, is still there, totally intact.
Okay, so if that's the starting point, if we're all these radically free, choosing selves, then the next question is, how do you build a fair society for all of us? Well, this vision of the self leads directly to a really core principle of liberal justice, the idea that the right has to come before the good. So what does that even mean, the right before the good? Well, think of it like this. The right is basically the set of neutral rules, the principles of fairness and justice that let all of us live together without stepping on each other's toes. And the good? That's your personal stuff, your values, your life goals, your beliefs about what makes life meaningful. And what liberalism says, especially the version from the philosopher John Rawls, is that we absolutely must agree on the rules of the right first. Only then can we all go off and pursue our own different ideas of the good. It's all about making sure no single group's vision gets forced on everybody else.
So the big question is, how do we figure out what those neutral principles are? And this is where Rawls comes up with this just brilliant thought experiment. He calls it the original position. Imagine this, you get to help design the rules for a new society, but you have to do it from behind a veil of ignorance. That means you have no idea who you're going to be in that society. You don't know if you'll be rich or poor, what your race or talents will be, or even what your beliefs are. So, what principles would you choose? The whole idea is that you'd have to pick principles that are truly fair for everyone because you can't rig the game in your own favor if you don't know what cards you're going to be dealt.
Okay, so that's the liberal picture. It's elegant, it's powerful, but Michael Sandel looks at this whole thing and basically says, hold on a second, is this really an accurate picture of who we are? And that question, that's the very heart of the communitarian challenge.
So Sandel proposes this powerful alternative. Instead of the unencumbered self, he gives us the situated self. And it's pretty much the exact opposite. Far from being this free-floating chooser, the situated self is deeply embedded in its social world. Your identity isn't something separate from your community or your history. No, it's made up of those things. Being a son or a daughter, a member of a town, a citizen of a country. Sandel says these aren't just hats you can put on and take off. They are a fundamental part of who you are.
And here's where it gets really crucial. Sandel argues that we're claimed by moral duties that we never, ever chose. I mean, think about the obligations you feel to your family. Did you sign a contract to love and support them? Of course not. And yet, those are probably some of the most powerful moral claims in your entire life. For Sandel, if you ignore these kinds of unchosen attachments, you're missing a huge piece of what it even means to be a person with moral character.
And this quote from Sandel just hits so hard. He says, to imagine a person incapable of constitutive attachments is not to conceive an ideally free and rational agent, but to imagine a person wholly without character, without moral depth. I mean, wow. What he's saying is that a person who is truly detached from all these defining ties, that's not some ideal of freedom. That's just an empty person. For Sandel, a person without those attachments is a person without character, because our character is built from the very communities and histories we're a part of.
Okay, so this is all really interesting, right? But you might be thinking, so what? This is just abstract philosophy. Well, it's not. This stuff matters in the real world, big time. Let's look at a couple of really tough cases where these two different visions of who we are lead to totally different answers.
So let's start with a really classic and frankly painful free speech dilemma. Should a group of neo-Nazis have the right to march through Skokie, Illinois, a community that was home to a large number of Holocaust survivors? I mean, this is a case that really pushes our principles right to the edge.
And how you answer this question, it really depends on which view of the self you start with. If you take the liberal, unencumbered view, well, the government has to be neutral about the content of speech. Harm is defined as physical violence or direct incitement. So, as offensive as it is, you have to protect their right to march. But if you start from the communitarian view of the situated self, the whole picture changes. You see people whose identities are deeply tied to their history and their community. And from that perspective, an attack on the group isn't just words. It's a profound personal harm to every single member. And suddenly, the answer isn't so simple anymore, is it?
All right, let's look at a second case that's just as controversial: affirmative action. The basic question is this: is it fair for universities to use race as a factor in admissions in order to promote a social goal like diversity?
Now, Sandel's critique here is super interesting. The common liberal defense of affirmative action goes something like this. Nobody really deserves their natural talents, it's just dumb luck, so society can use those talents as common assets to help achieve a social good. But Sandel spots a huge contradiction here. He says, wait a minute, that argument treats individuals like tools for society's purposes, and he argues that this logic only really makes sense if we believe we're part of a community that has a claim on our talents, which is exactly the idea of the situated self that the whole unencumbered liberal view is supposed to reject. It's a real philosophical bind.
So, all of this brings us right back where we started, to that big, enduring question. Who are we really? Are we just independent atoms floating around making choices? Or are we more like nodes in a complex web of communal ties? Because how we answer that, well, it pretty much defines our entire political world. So here it is, the two visions, laid out side by side. You've got the unencumbered self, a self that's all about its capacity to choose. And that leads to a vision of justice that's all about individual freedom and government neutrality. And then you have the situated self, which is defined by the communities it belongs to. And that points toward a very different kind of justice, one that's tied to figuring out and pursuing a common good together.
And for Sandel, the takeaway is pretty clear. As he puts it, the liberal vision is flawed, the aspiration incomplete. In his view, this idea of a purely free, unencumbered person isn't just wrong, it's incomplete. It leaves out some of the most essential parts of our moral lives and what it really means to be human.
And that right there is why all of this matters so much. This is not just some dusty academic debate. Every single time we argue about free speech or patriotism or what we owe each other as citizens, we are tapping into this deep philosophical fight. It's like the ghost in the machine of almost all our political arguments today.
So, we'll leave you with the ultimate question that this entire debate boils down to. What is a just society? Is it a neutral playing field where the government just protects our freedom to go off and do our own thing? Or should it be something more? A community that actively tries to figure out together what a good life looks like and helps us all to achieve it? Your answer to that question, well, it changes everything.